Afternoon, everybody. I thought at this time of year it would be appropriate to invite a few friends of mine along from Halls to discuss their respective attitudes and experiences this year in the commercial, fine arts, agricultural and planning departments. So I'm going to introduce you first of all to my colleagues, starting with Alexander, and he's going to explain his role within Halls.
I am Alexander Clement. I'm a fine art auctioneer and valuer, so I look after all of the fine art auctions that happen within Halls Battlefield.
Kate?
I'm Kate Oakes. I'm a recently qualified Royal Chartered Surveyor and I work within the Royal Professional Team, handling instructions from Royal Agency, valuations, compulsory purchase and everything in between.
Lindsay?
And I'm Lindsay Fisher. I work in Halls Planning Department. We cover a range of planning and development opportunities and support our clients along the way.
I think, as I've outlined at various videos, the commercial market has been all over the place this year, and it's been very difficult to establish particular trends and tones. So I thought it was quite interesting to learn from my colleagues how they've experienced the market and what trends they've seen and what their experience has been this year. So Alexander, over to you.
Yeah, well, 2024 has been a strong year for fine art generally. We've had some really good results. Possibly, we hope, as a result of changes that we made to the auction programme. We've focused more on specialist sales. So we've been attracting better quality lots for our auctions, which is good news. But the existing trends that were already there, so for example, the furniture market has been particularly weak. And so we've had to make some changes in how we sell furniture in order to respond to the market. Similarly, the clock specialism has been pretty weak as well. So a lot of items that used to sell really well going back to the 1990s and early 2000s now are really struggling to make a decent amount. So again, we've had to respond to that sort of trend in the market. But then we've seen good upward trends in watches, jewellery, silver, modern art has done very well. Modern furniture has been doing very well. And ceramics, funnily enough, as well. A department that's been a bit in the doldrums has recently picked up, and over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've seen some really good, strong results in European ceramics.
Do you think that's I've seen the commercial market, everybody's got generally defensive. They've got a little bit uncertain where the world is. Is that sort of been shown because everybody's sort of gone to the gold market because it's safe, or is that a good analysis of it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've seen an upward trend in particularly precious metals and gemstones for that reason, because generally speaking, if there's political instability, people do tend to turn to those sort of commodities. So that's definitely been behind it.
Yeah, probably good analysis of the year, I suspect. Kate, over to you.
I think in terms of the market, it's been a very interesting year, especially the later part of the year, change of government, budget. We're unsure where that's going to go in terms of land prices. I think it's too early to tell before we have that spring mini budget. Earlier in the year, I think as a general department, we've sold some very interesting farms. We've sold some exceptionally good farms with the sale of Turn Farm, which was really, I think, a once in a lifetime. You don't see farms like that come on the market regularly. And we've seen a really strong market. We've had smaller lots of land making an awful lot per acre through our auctions, small lots of woodland again being very attractive. Generally speaking, I think it's too early to tell what's going to happen to the land market, but it's definitely a time where we've got some instability with the changes to APR, BPR, and especially changes to funding for farmers and whether that's going to have an impact, especially within the budget, which is something we weren't 100% sure about earlier this year. Yeah. But again, the loss of funding to farmers through BPS is something we're going to see an even bigger cut-off on. So the impacts that's going to have are untold at the moment.
I think I often get confused with the other James Evans. So unfortunately, I'm out and getting quizzed on agricultural issues, which I have no clue on. So it's quite interesting to get an expert's opinion on that one. Lindsay, obviously there's been some changes in the planning world. We've got a new government. They seem to be driven on residential development very much, and I'm sure you're seeing some changes. So how have you seen this year?
Yeah, just a huge amount really. So we've obviously Labour government have said they want 1.5 million homes by 2029. So that is, we're having a lot of people, a huge amount of farmers actually increasingly calling us, asking whether they've got suitable land for development. I think there's been a range of changes as well, particularly in England. So we used to have, we could submit a planning application, you'd get a free go. So if for whatever reason it wasn't approved first time or it was withdrawn, we could then resubmit under a free go. However, that's now changed and you don't get that free go anymore, which is been quite a significant change for us. So we're now having to submit pre-applications rather than going straight in for full planning or outline planning, which is affecting timescales, it's affecting costs, and it's just meaning that we're really encouraging clients to get in touch with us a lot sooner with anything that they're sort of thinking of doing.
I think the interesting challenge, well, there's probably reading the newspapers over the weekend, one, is there enough planners? And secondly, is there enough builders? Which I think that's quite a, sort of an interesting problem that we've got with all this sort of hopefully forward-thinking policy. I suppose I'll now move on at this time of year. You sort of think about what have your highlights been and where have you been? Clearly for us, we were very successful and very lucky to win the commercial agents in the Midlands this year. So that was obviously a very strong point for us and a great credit to the team and what they've done and a great credit to the practice. So I suppose it's a good time to look at what your major achievements have been this year. So over to you, Alexander, again.
Well, I think for me personally, my favourite lot of the year was quite an important Rolex wristwatch that was owned by an explorer, a man called Vital Alsar, who in the 1970s made a number of transatlantic journeys on hand-built craft. And he was sponsored by Rolex. He was one of their ambassadors, and he was presented with a number of watches during his exploits, one of which was handed down through his family and came to us, which was really exciting to have that in the sale.
Great, that's great. Kate?
I think
apart from being qualified, I suppose that's going to be your major key, isn't it?
Personal level, passing my APC to be MRICS, also my exam to then be a fellow of the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers. I think as a department, we've had a really strong year in terms of supporting our clients. It's been a year with a lot of change, whether that's from funding, grants, the most recent changes we've seen again with inheritance tax. So I think we've had a strong year in supporting clients. We've got quite a lot done in the agency side, sold a lot of farms, a lot of land. So I think it's keeping that forward momentum has been the biggest positive of the year. We've managed to support a lot of people who are, customers of our market or have been very long-standing clients as well.
Beautiful. And Lindsay, obviously the major coup was getting you this year to come to Halls, clearly. So that's probably your highlight and maybe Halls. So, but after that, where do we go?
Well, I think just as a department as a whole, obviously they are massively increasing in size in terms of the number of people we have within the department. So that's probably the highlight of the year for them. We are finding we're having huge volumes of calls of, people who potentially haven't dealt with Halls before. So it's great that they're coming over. And then, we're just getting involved in all sorts of different projects. It's not just, it's not just houses. It's not just, farm diversification. There's all sorts of things that people are really starting to think outside the box because they wanted to change their income stream. So it's just great to be a part of that and actually work with clients to just achieve their dreams. But to know that they're calling us first, realizing that we're quite a key part to their journey, and it just makes such a difference. And then, to see that through the process and seeing clients achieve what their goals are, it's just
makes their day, and they might give you a Christmas present. You never know if you're lucky. I think we obviously get paid for our professional advice and sort of without giving too much away today, so they keep coming back to us. We're sort of obviously going to look at what the future holds for next year, and I think in my sector it's sort of been very difficult. First time I've ever not been able to tell people where I think they should put their money and how they should progress. Hopefully some inspiration will come to me over Christmas so I can guide them a bit further. But I think that just is a reflection of the choppy waters that we've been through, and very much a stop-start year, as I call it. But I suppose looking at your sector, Alexander, how do you see that going forward next year, and where's the tips?
I think next year is probably going to be a year of two halves. I think the first half of the year is going to be reasonably steady, if a little flat, to be honest, because there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's not very much speculation going on. Yep. People are only really bidding on things that they're absolutely 100% certain of. Second half of the year, though, I predict that there's going to be a lot of financial instability coming out of the United States of America.
Do you?
I think it's going to be pretty choppy waters.
You clearly didn't vote for Trump then.
Well, I'm not an American citizen.
No, but you didn't sort of encourage all your friends not to.
No, I wasn't behind the Trump campaign. So I think that is going to result in some pretty significant financial instability along similar lines to 2008 and 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be that kind of seismic, and that is going to push again the price of non-productive assets. So, precious metals, the aforementioned, jewels, watches, modern art, those things are going to increase in value, and we're going to see a return to some interesting kind of buoyancy coming back to the market, because people are going to turn to those tangible assets rather than financial products.
It's very interesting hearing that, because I first time in a conversation last week, someone said to me, who I respect, said they think that we're going to go into a recession, and that's the first word. Our job is clearly to encourage, talk up the world and be encouraging, but it's interesting your analysis of it. Where do you think we're going to go, Kate? Youngster, you've got to be dynamic, drive us forward.
Well, I think I mentioned it before, and it's not something we want to dwell on, but it's something that's going to have significant effects on the agricultural world, and it is that APR and BPR removal, and the thresholds that are in place for that. Seeing where that goes, whether there is any changes in the mini budget. It seems like Starmer is pretty staunch on there won't be any changes.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
It's a wait and see. You hear from various bodies like the NFU, they're having talks, so it is very much a hold your breath, wait and see what comes out of that. It's clear SFI, the expanded offer, came out this year. It sort of trickled through with those expressions of interest, and we're now no longer needing to do those. So I think the rollout of SFI will be really stepped up a gear, especially with the caps that are now in place on the basic payment scheme. So that replacement will need to be accelerated, and farmers will be needing to look at that more. Again, capital grants having that hold on them, and then the Spring 25 review, something that a lot of farmers will be really waiting for with bated breath. There's a lot of farmers who are looking to capital grants, whether it's fencing or larger projects like roofing. And again, I think it's been clear we don't really know what's going to come out of this government.
I think that's a definite for us all. Yeah, we're a bit all over the place, as we call it.
It's a wait and see thing, but in terms of the market, again, it is something we don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
Yeah, but your job is going to be to advise them and pull them out of any holes they're in, I suppose. So over to you on that one, Lindsay.
I think for us next year, it's obviously with the government and the housing shortage, that is going to be quite a significant part of our department. But also a lot of what we do comes from, what Kate does. So, farmers getting grants are massively increasing, but with grants, they need planning. So if it's whether it's roof covering or silage clamps, they're then coming to us because they need the necessary planning. And, working between England and Wales, actually, there's quite a huge difference in, the way that we treat applications. So it's, farmers are increasingly having to change the way they do things, and more they're having to go through more red tape, which then involves us because we're having to make sure they've got the right planning in place. So it's interesting at how it all trickles through. Yeah,
I think the whole world's a bit interesting. I'm sort of going to just look at one aspect for each of you that has affected you this year, and certainly for me, and I think it's going to be ongoing, is the challenge that now pension funds are fronting, and how funds will deal with that in a property way going forward commercially, because obviously those sort of benefits seem to be being removed. And we had this, I'm sure you had, Kate, loads of valuations just prior to the budget, and I had sleepless nights, and it's been a tough time, but we've got through that. But I think people are struggling. I think they're going to have a look, where should we put our money? I think we can find a route for everybody, and it's going to be great. But if there was one big moment for you this year, Alexander, what's that been that's affected your industry?
I don't know whether I could pin it down to a particular moment, but I think the three points during the course of the year have been the election, the budget, and then the US election. But broadly across, so that's kind of introduced a bit of uncertainty, and people have definitely been more hesitant. But I think running the kind of undercurrent has been the cost of living, which has really had an impact, particularly on the sub £500 market. Yeah. So where traditional collectors of those sorts of items at that kind of budget are now thinking, do I really want to spend money on this collectible
Yes, yeah,
or that piece of furniture when actually I've got bills to pay and food to buy and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we've been in the art market.
Yeah. Dramatic effect, in your suspect that's the budget, a bit like me, Kate, in that respect, I would imagine, unless you got another one up your sleeve.
The budget was the secondary sort of wave that we had from the election. I think the biggest moment was the election. There was a lot of farmers pre-election who were really worried whether they'd got outstanding grant offers, whether they were looking into moving into schemes or anything else. It was the real itch. It was quite clear later on in that whole election that it was swinging towards the Labour Party, which traditionally, you know, the way they've worked with the countryside and farmers hasn't always been favourable.
No.
So I think that was the biggest moment. The secondary one, as you say, is the amount of valuations we've got coming in now for people who've taken advice from their other advisors like solicitors, accountants, on how they can try and gear themselves up to the changes coming forward. I mean, it's always hard to plan for, you know, that event, and the biggest thing is people don't necessarily die in the right order.
No,
and
it's
a hard thing to breach, especially in farming families that are really generational businesses.
Yeah.
So coming forward, it's the amount of valuations we're going to have come up because a lot of people are going to need them. But then in undertaking those valuations, it's making sure we are giving the best quality of valuations and strategic advice we can in a market that potentially is going to become a little bit unstable, or it's going to see some changes coming forward.
Yeah, I think as a sector, you've probably had the biggest change across this year, and how it's all transmitted. And we've obviously got various things and protests going on, so it's all in the news, and we're all trying to address with that. Lindsay, one big moment in your life, apart from joining us?
I think actually, as the department as a whole, biodiversity net gain has had a huge impact on us, because planning applications previously, you know, quite often required ecology surveys. You know, ecologists go out, do the survey, and we could work with them, and we are still obviously very much working with them. But the challenge we've had now is that because it's become mandatory in England, so any planning application now has to have an ecologist go out on site, get the baseline, and it all has to go through a metric to ensure that we've got the correct enhancements. However, you know, quite often farmers, they've got the land, they've got the availability for the planting. However, if you haven't got that availability, you're then having to look at off-site gains, which then it's a cost that's huge, and it's something that quite often it's just not then sustainable for the applicant. And also it's timescales. Ecologists it's new to them within reason, and it's just, they are just all so busy. So, you know, we're finding it's increasing our planning application process by 2-3 months just because these additional surveys are required. And then not only the cost of, you know, having the extra work done, it's then all the planting that's needed. You know, all of that comes at a significant cost. And it's just, you know, people haven't even, you know, it hasn't got to the point where people are talking about BNG enough that they're even realising they need to consider it.
And I think it's affected my world.
Yeah.
I'm sort of, commercial development is a very difficult thing. We pulled out one piece of land, significant amount this year, because we just couldn't quantify what the biodiversity net gain was going to be. And I think unfortunately, it's another taxation. It's difficult for us all to qualify that a little bit. I know it's got a little bit more certain, but it's certainly going to have implications going forward. And I think it's going to have respective implications on our land prices going forward. So it's that uncertain top of order. I think today, obviously, people have seen the video I put together. It was important to bring along my teammates because they're probably far more intellectual than me, and you can now see the diversity that Halls is able to offer. So obviously, I'd like to thank you all for being part of this. I think the most important thing is to wish everybody a happy Christmas and a very prosperous New Year. So I'm sure we'd all wish them on that. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.